Statistics Canada has released January's job numbers and they've outpaced expectations. Canada's economy added 76,000 jobs, 3 times what many analysts were predicting. That gain was concentrated, though. Almost half was in manufacturing, but StatsCan also emphasized that sector would be especially vulnerable to U.S. tariff onslaughts. Overall, the unemployment rate inched down 0.1 of a percentage point. Hard hit the past month was the public sector, which lost over 8,000 jobs. Now for the latest look at the job market in Canada, we're joined by Moshe Lander in Montreal. He is a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University. And Moshe, I want to start with this. Everybody's excited. Canada added 76,000 jobs, 3 times some analyst predictions. Why aren't you excited about these numbers? Because my producer tells me that you said this is all an illusion.
It is a bit of an illusion. With Trump's tariffs coming in, one of the things that we saw was that a lot of economic activity was front-loaded ahead of those tariffs. So the thought was, let's get as much produced as we can. Let's export as much as we can to get it in ahead of the tariffs. And even if it's sitting in inventory in factories or in warehouses in the US, at least it beats the tariffs. So it's maybe a little bit of an illusion that it's not necessarily that the Canadian economy is doing well. It's this false idea that maybe the economy is doing better than expected because of the expected damage that's going to come from tariffs.
Okay, interesting. Now, these 25% tariffs could consequently impact jobs in this country. We know that. So how concerned should we be as Canadians? Because we hear some numbers out there. I think I heard like 500,000 in Ontario alone.
Yeah, that's the Premier's number, right? So
yes,
I'm not exactly sure what the economic analysis...
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the economic analysis behind his numbers. It could be a Chihuahua that's making up these numbers for all I know. But look, the reality is that if you look at lumber, oil and gas, farming, agriculture, mining, hydroelectricity, fisheries, every sector in every province has the potential to be affected by this. So you could see huge job losses that occur across the board. But it's not just the headline industries that could be affected, right? It's the secondary or tertiary industries that could also be affected. What if you're working at Tim Hortons and part of your shift is that you're serving people who are going to the auto factories in Ontario? If they stop working because of these tariffs, you might find that your shift is canceled as well. So the unemployment numbers could rise, not because of the headline industries that we keep talking about in the news, but because of these derivative industries that are tied to those primary industries.
Yeah, you're so right about that. Once you take the money out of their pocket, they're not spending it at all the businesses in their communities. That's problematic. You mentioned that even simply talking about tariffs could impact the job market even before they're implemented. Explain that for us.
Oh, you did your research, Dwight. I'm so happy.
I got a team behind me. I got a team.
That's exactly it. So if Trump says, I'm going to put tariffs on Canada, even if he doesn't do it, what do you think business does at this point? They say, well, if tariffs are coming, I don't know what I should be doing in terms of investment, in terms of trying to plan for the future. And so even if he says, oh, psych, I was just kidding, the damage is done at that point. So even if he says, I'll come back in 30 days. So when he comes back in 30 days and says, I'm going to give you another 30-day extension, businesses become paralyzed because they can't make decisions at that point because they don't know at what point he's actually going to enact the tariff. It's almost like the idea of what's scarier, actually getting the needle at the dentist's office or the anticipation of getting the needle at the dentist's office? It's the same sort of thing, that sometimes the anticipation is worse than the actual event itself. No offense to dentists. But the idea is that sometimes the mere psychological impact is more damaging than the actual thing. So that could be what's driving then a little bit of damage then, is that he's merely keeping us on pins and needles, waiting for something that might never occur.
I feel like somebody told you that I was afraid of needles, and that's why you said that, because a lot of us out here are. Let's talk about, before we let you go, Moshe, the long-term implications of tariffs on Canada's employment and jobs, on our overall economy, because Canadians are really worried about this, and a lot of the people I've been putting this question to say, yeah, we should be.
Yeah, the short-term impact is much bigger than the long-term impact. So even if in the short term, the Premier of Ontario is correct, that we lose 500,000 jobs, at some point, industry is going to come along and say, look at all those people that are sitting unemployed. Here's the ability to pick and choose employees to employ them in our industries that haven't been as damaged by the tariffs. So in the long run, the impact is going to be much more muted, but it's the short run impact. And so what is the government going to do to try and ease the short run effects to help us get to the long run impact, where at some point all of these workers are going to be absorbed into some industry that's maybe not affected by tariffs or that actually benefits from the tariffs, because even though the tariffs are generally seen as a bad thing, there are going to be some industries that say, great, now that we don't have an auto industry in Ontario to work about, look at all of those workers that we can now employ in these other industries. So the long-term impact then could be much, much less than that short-term impact. But still, you got to get from here to there. And that's where maybe we look to the government to say, how do we bridge that gap without doing huge damage to the economy?
Can I ask your opinion on how the governments are faring so far in this fight? Your opinion, want to give them a grade for me, maybe, Moshe, and how we're doing in this battle?
They're doing a solid C-. So just enough to pass, but not enough to get a letter of recommendation from me. Look, Team Canada is anything but united. And that's exactly what Trump wants to do, is drive a wedge between the Premier of Alberta, the Premier of Ontario, the Premier of Quebec, and the Prime Minister's office as well. If you can keep everybody on edge, then as long as they keep fighting with each other, mission accomplished, because at the end of the day, he sells himself on the art of the deal. And so how does the art of the deal work for this president? It's divide and conquer. And so if he can create everybody in a state of disunity, then that gives him the ability to gain leverage in saying, all right, I'll play one off the other. There doesn't seem to be as unified view in Canada as, say, Team Canada playing in the Four Nations Cup. So I think in that regard, then we need to do a little bit more of team building if we want to be able to withstand what comes up in about 20-something days.
He knows his hockey, too. I wonder if you mark your students that hard, Moshe. He's a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University, and he joined us tonight from Montreal. Thank you, Moshe. Appreciate your time, as always.
Anytime.